Hi everybody, hope all is well. So there's a very foundational idea I want to go over in this week's Parsha Behaalotecha, and the idea is as follows. So I'm going to give a little bit of background information. So we know the Jews, after they left Egypt, they were in the desert for 40 years. And obviously, if you have millions of people in the desert for 40 years, you need a lot of things to happen to take care of them. So Hashem, God, He did three out of many miraculous miracles. These are the three main miracles He did to keep, to sustain the Jews throughout those years. Number one, He gave them a well, and this well was not an ordinary well. It was a well that went throughout, like it followed them in the desert. It was miraculous. It was a rock that hundreds of billions of gallons of water came out, and that basically gave water to millions of people in the desert. And then there's something called the clouds, the ananei hakavod, the clouds of glory. And the clouds of glory basically gave the Jews, shelter. It protected them from their enemies. It protected them from the heat of the desert. It smoothed out the ground for them, gave them air conditioning, dry cleaning, a lot of stuff. A lot of miracles happened with that. And last but not least, the man. So the man is basically a very, very miraculous food. It's unlike any other food. It's actually healthy. And the man is basically a food that God brought down from heaven. He would literally rain. It would rain from the sky. And this food, it basically tasted like when you would eat it. Number one, it doesn't matter who was eating it. However much you ate, you felt full. So if one guy would eat, a lot, and one guy would eat a little, they'd both feel full. So that was one miracle with it. Another miracle with it is that when they ate it, it tasted like anything you wanted. You wanted to taste like chicken, you want to taste like rice, you want to taste like this restaurant, that restaurant, doesn't matter. Whatever you tried before and whatever taste you would imagine, it would taste like that food. So having all that in mind, every Jew in the desert, that's what they had. That's what their food was for 40 years. And their water and their shelter. Now, when you go through this week's Parsha, it's really, really something very perplexing happens. So throughout the Parsha, the Jews, they start complaining. And we know, when the Jews were in the desert, there was the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav are the Egyptians who left with them. When the Jews left Egypt, some Egyptians also wanted to escape with the Jews, and Moses brought, without asking Hashem, from what it seemed like, brought these Egyptians along. And it says that the Erev Rav, right? They caused a lot of problems to the Jews. A lot of times when you see in the Torah that people start complaining and stuff goes down in the desert, all these stories, a lot of them, they're the ones instigating it. So it says that they instigated the complaints from the start, but what happened is they started instigating the complaints, and then the rest of the Jews started complaining, and they started saying, like, we miss Egypt, we want to go back. The fact was they were slaves in Egypt. They were suffering for many years, 210 years of brutal hardship, suffering. Their babies were getting killed, craziness. And they started complaining to God. God took them out of Egypt, and they started saying, God, we want to go back to Egypt. We miss the cucumbers we had, and the onions, and the fish, and the meat. We want meat. And they started complaining and complaining. And what happened after this? They started complaining. God said, okay, you want meat, you want this, you want that, whatever. He gave them meat, He gave them this and that. And after that, a huge tragedy happened. Many, many Jews in the desert died. And now, when you analyze the story, it seems, based off the background I gave before, it seems a little bit like, it doesn't really make sense. Why are the Jews complaining? Why are you complaining? You literally have man. Man tastes like whatever you want it to taste like. You want it to taste like meat, it'll taste like meat. You want it to taste like this food, you want it to taste like that food, it'll taste like any food. So why are the Jews in the desert complaining about food when they already have food? And not only that, the man was free. Man didn't cost money, it came from heavens. They started complaining, we missed the food in Egypt because it was also free. Another question, what do you mean free? The man's also free. The food you're getting now is free. Why are you complaining, let me go back to Egypt and get food that was free? Your food's free now. So, one of the great Torah commentators, Rashi says that he gives us the answer to what was really going behind. There was something deep, a deep psychology, a deep message the Torah is trying to teach us, and why the Torah recorded this story. Obviously, the Torah is not a story. It's not a storybook. It's instructions for life. These stories, everything within them are teaching us lessons. And Rashi tells us that you know what they were really complaining about? Yeah, the man was free and the food in Egypt was free, but there are two different kinds of frees. The man, the special food that came from heaven that tastes like anything you wanted, yeah, it was free, but the food in Egypt was free from what? It was free from mitzvot. It was free from mitzvot. What does that mean? Meaning, when they were in Egypt, they weren't Jews. They weren't Jews, so they didn't have any obligation to eat. They didn't have any obligation to do mitzvot, to keep Torah, to keep Shabbat, to keep anything, to keep the laws of modesty and all that stuff. So whenever they got food, it wasn't based off of their actions, based off how righteous they were. They would get food regardless. But once they're in the desert and Hashem was giving, now Hashem, God is feeding them and God is giving them man. Now that Hashem, when He gave it on the condition, yeah, it's free, but it's free based off of your actions. Meaning what? Meaning that if you're a righteous person, the food will come to you much easier than if you're a not righteous person. It says I think the Midrash, that whoever was righteous, the man would come down right at their doorstep, right outside their tent, and if you were less righteous, you had to go a little bit farther to get your food. So the idea is what? That their man, their food, or a better word for it, parnasa means their sustenance, their livelihood. Like nowadays we make money for a livelihood. Back then they didn't have money, it was food, right? Food, shelter, all that stuff, right? So their parnasa, their sustenance, their livelihood, depended on what? Their righteousness level. But in Egypt, it didn't depend on their righteousness level. Whether you're righteous, not righteous, you're a bad person, you're a good person, it doesn't matter. You get food at the end of the day. So so to answer this question, why were the Jews complaining? They weren't complaining because the man was free. The man tastes like whatever. The man was the best food. But what were they complaining about? That Judaism is a burden to them. That I don't want to keep mitzvah. I don't want my life I don't want my sustenance to depend on if I'm a tzaddik or not. I don't want my food and everything to depend on and whether or not I'm a righteous person. I want to be like a non-Jew. I don't want to have rules, regulations. I want to eat whatever I want. I don't have to worry if I'm getting my food today or not based off of my actions. Why? Because really, what the underlying psychology behind it is what? That they wanted to just do whatever they want. For them, the commandments that God gave us, the mitzvot, were a burden to them. It was just a burden. And they wanted to, when you have something heavy on you, what do you want to do as soon as you're carrying something heavy? You're carrying a burden, you want to throw it off your back. You want to release the yoke of the burden upon yourself. So what happened? God gave them a burden in their eyes. God gave them the Torah. God gave them the mitzvah. And for them, it was a burden. So what did? They were complaining about it to the point that what? They wanted to throw it off their back, and they started complaining and because of that, fights broke out and people ended up dying. That's how crazy it was to them. So what do we learn from here? We learn a very important lesson. That the idea of what? That Judaism should not be a burden. To the Jews, unfortunately, obviously we can't judge them. They're on a much higher level than we are. But I'm just saying from the perspective of the Torah, the lesson the Torah is trying to teach us is that Judaism shouldn't be a burden. If Judaism is a burden to you, that means you're missing out on what Judaism is. That means you don't understand what Judaism is. I'll give. There's a very, very important idea. We live in a world where people basically they look at Judaism as a burden. They look at Judaism as that, God is here, God's out to get me. This Torah, this Shabbat, kosher, this, that, all these things, God just gave it to me because He wants to make my life hard. He wants to make me limited and restricted. And it sucks, I can't do whatever I want. And unfortunately, that's why many, many people, they don't want to become religious. What do they think it means? What they think it means to be religious? What does it mean to be religious? If you tell a not religious person or someone who's not so affiliated, what's religious, or to become religious really means to become close to Hashem. But for them, religious means, oh my gosh, I have to become a rabbi, I have to have a beard, I have to, I'm barely shower and have dandruff on my shoulders and study all day for 15 hours, right? And I'm not allowed to go to work. I'm not allowed to make money. I have to be poor. I have to go from house to house begging for charity. That's a misconception. People think to become religious, to become close to God, to become, more affiliated with Judaism, it's only on the condition where I have to give up my life. I can't go on vacation. I can't enjoy. I can't get out of life. Basically, I have to suffer. Basically, and most people don't want to live a life like that. They don't want to live. Who wants to live a life like that? And that's for the guy. And if you're a girl, the misconception is what? Oh, if I become a religious, a Jew, and I'm a girl, What does that mean? Oh, I have to be in the kitchen all day. I'm not allowed to get a job. I have to, be a baby maker. That's it, basically. That's my limit. I'm limited for the rest of my life. And the idea is what? God's trying to tell us, if you think that Judaism is here to make your life hard, you think Torah is here to make your life a burden, you miss the point of Judaism. You miss the point. That's why God, unfortunately, the Jews in the desert, God unfortunately took them out. They didn't survive. It says in the Torah, they ate so much meat. God said, okay, you want meat? You want the burden of you don't want to eat manna and rely on the idea of that you get the manna based off how righteous you are. Here, I'll give you meat. I'll make you like a goy in Egypt. Here, take the meat. And they said they ate so much meat. They ate so much meat. It came out of their noses, and because of that, a lot of people and Jews ended up dying. A plague happened. Point I'm trying to say is that they missed the point, and God said, "You missed the point. There's no point of living anymore. You think I'm out here to get you? You think I created this entire world because I'm trying to make your life hard? You missed the point of life. It's not worth it to live anymore because you're just basically missing out on the purpose of life." So what's the idea? The idea is what? That Judaism is not a burden. If God gave you commandments, He gave you Torah, He gave you mitzvot, He gave you a purpose in life, He's not doing it to make your life hard. You could be, and the problem is that people, they usually associate religion with the idea of they compare it to, the non-Jewish religions, like for example Christianity. Christianity says you want to have a good life. You want to be righteous. You want to get close to God. You want to be a holy person. Separate yourself. You're not allowed. You want to be. The highest thing is to be a priest, not have wife, not have kids. Separate yourself from that. Or for example, they look at Buddhist monks. They say, oh, these are religious people, and what do? They run away to the mountains. They fast all day, they separate themselves from society, they don't enjoy, they don't do this, they don't do that. So what's the idea that since we live in Western, in a Western civilization, we basically project, through the eyes of Westernism, we look at Jews from the lens of Westernism. We look at we look at Judaism from the eyes of Americanism. And what happens? We distort Judaism, we treat it like other religions. Well, Judaism's not like any other religion. Judaism says we're not like the monks. The monks say, I had a debate with a monk like a couple of weeks ago, and the monk's like, the purpose of life is to be compassionate, and the purpose of life is to do good and stop suffering in the world. I'm like, if that's the case, then why are you running away to the mountains all day? Why are you separating yourself from society? Why are you contradicting yourself? The idea is what Judaism says. This is what if you want to know what Judaism has to say on the topic of of what I'm talking about, this is the idea. The Judaism says you're of course allowed to eat good food. You're of course allowed to have a good-looking spouse. You're of course allowed to take vacations and make money and go to work. Most of the Jews I know are literally religious Jews are doctors, lawyers, businessmen. The top people in society. Judaism, there's no contradiction, to be a professional and to also be a religious Jew. No contradiction at all. And even rabbis, I know some rabbis. Not every rabbi, God forbid, has dandruff on their shoulder. That's okay. You saw one or two, people who, unfortunately weren't able to take care of themselves, but that doesn't mean you can't project that to everybody else. That's not the case. There's some rabbis who are perfectly fit, perfectly healthy. They don't have big bellies like people think. When I was debating the monk. The monk's like, oh yeah, he saw me, I'm like a skinny guy, I don't have a long beard. He's like, oh, I thought you're gonna be like a rabbi with a big stomach. I'm like, no, you got it wrong. They don't look at one stereotypical thing and judge everybody else like that. But the point I'm trying to say is that if you're looking at Judaism, God said you could be religious, you can enjoy, you could take a vacation. Nothing's wrong with that. You could eat good food. You could enjoy life. Judaism says we're not like other religions that say run away from the physical. We say take the physical, take the eating, the drinking, the sleeping, the vacations, you want to play basketball and chill a little bit, relax, whatever. But don't do it as an end in itself. These things are not ends. Going out to a restaurant with your family, those things are great. You got to do it, but that's not an end goal. Those are a means to an end. Judaism says everything you do in this world, you're eating, you're drinking, you're sleeping, everything, whatever, you're working, you're going to school, trying to make you're all doing it for what? To get to the purpose of life, which is to get close to God, to have a relationship with God. And you're taking all the physical. When you work, the money you make, You're elevating that. You're turning into spiritual because your goal is, I want to make money. Why do I want to make money? To do mitzvot, to keep Hashem's Torah, so I could support my family, so I could support my kids, so I could give charity, so I could host people in my house. I need to pay rent. I need to host people in my house. To do kindness, to do acts of charity, to do good with it. So Judaism's not against those things. You could totally be a religious Jew and dress nice and take vacations and totally live a normal life. But the idea is what? Don't get so caught up in the means that you forget what the end goal is. And unfortunately a lot of people, that's the mindset, and they forget what the end goal is. So Judaism, Hashem says what? I'm here. What is the Torah? What does the word Torah mean? The word Torah means instructions. Torat Chaim. Right? We say Torah. What does Chai mean? Chai, like the Chai necklace, life. Torat Chaim. Torah is what? Torah is instructions for life. The creator of the universe, he didn't just put us into this world and say, go figure out life. And go figure out through trial and error. You want to figure out how to have a good marriage? Go for 10 divorces and then figure out what's good but what works and what doesn't work. No. Oh, you want to raise kids? You only have one chance to raise kids. You only have one chance to get married. You only have one chance to make a good impression, right? God says, don't worry, I gave you a cheat code to life. Before you go and do all those things, right? Or while you're doing those things, I have something called the instruction manual for life, the Torah, the oral Torah, the written Torah. And in those things, I give you my divine wisdom, because I created the psychology of people. I created the world. I know how to raise kids better than anybody else. I created them. I created the world. I created husband and wife. I created the psychology of a woman. I created depression, anxiety. I know what works and what doesn't work. So I'm giving you, the Jewish people, this instruction manual, and I'm giving it to you. And if you study it, not only will you get heaven, an amazing life, and ultimate pleasure, and infinite pleasure of having a relationship with me in heaven, you'll have the best life in this world. Why? Because I didn't give you the Torah to make your life a burden. I didn't give you mitzvot. Being religious is not a burden. I gave it to you. Again, religious means getting close to God. I gave all these things to you. What? So you have the best life in this world. And not only will you have the best life in this world in a physical sense, in a spiritual sense also, everything connects. Everything's connected. So I'll tell you a story just to finish off. The story goes, there was a guy. I'm going to change the name because I don't know if the person wants me to use his name. Let's call him David, okay? David basically grew up as a not religious Jew, totally not connected, no Shabbat, no kosher, nothing, none of the 613. And, he knew he was Jewish, and he went to college, he went to a secular college. And while he was in college, in colleges, there's campus rabbis and stuff like that, and one approached him and started talking to him. And this David, he was a philosophy major, he's very into those kind of topics, like deep ideas and concepts. And what happened was that this rabbi started challenging David. He said, David, Judaism is true. I could give you proof. I could give you evidence. And David, by the way, was an atheist. I could give you evidence for God, how God exists, how you know all this stuff. And the rabbi started giving David the evidence. And David's like, what do you mean? I'm going to talk to my professors. He went back and forth, until he came to the point. And David was a very, very intelligent guy. And David said, you know what? That's it. He just proved to me God exists. He just proved to me Judaism is true. That's it. Judaism's true. I got it. And now all this stuff of what these religious people are doing, Shabbat, kosher, praying, this, that, I got to start doing. So what happened? David started keeping everything. He kept kosher, he kept Shabbat, he prayed, he put on tefillin every day. He started learning Torah and he was doing all these stuff, going to, Friday night meals and this and that, whatever. And he was miserable. All his friends were telling him, David, what are you doing? Why aren't you going to the club anymore? Why aren't you chilling? This, that. And David's like, listen, Judaism is true. What can I do? I have to keep it. This is true. What do you want to do? At the end of the day, this is true. The truth is the truth, whether I like it or not. If you eat unhealthy food, whether you like it or not, it's going to cause damage to the body. So to here, this is true. I went through the evidence. I understood it. That's it. But his friend's like, what do you mean? You don't have to do it. Do whatever you want. But he's like, listen, I'm a man of the truth. This is it. I got to do it. So David was basically doing Judaism. He was keeping everything, but he was miserable. And nothing was working. Until one day, he went to another religious person's house. He was eating there for one of the meals. And somehow this conversation came up. And the religious person, he started talking to him, and David's like, listen, I'm just keeping it because I have to, but I hate it. I'm miserable, this, that. And the religious person said a very important idea that changed David's life forever. The religious person said, David, listen, I know it's hard. I know you don't like this. I know you don't like that. But let me tell you something. God. Look at God. God created this entire universe. Before God created the universe, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. So now, if God is a being that's above space, above time, He's perfect, He's infinite, He's not lacking anything. By definition, He can't be infinite, it means He's not lacking. So what would make sense for God? To create a world or not to create a world? If He's perfect and He's not lacking anything, what does it make sense? Just stay the same, be God by yourself, or create a world? The answer is obviously to be by yourself. Not why should God create a world? Is He lacking anything? Is He missing anything? Obviously, it makes sense logically that for God to just stay the same, not do anything. He's perfect. If you're perfect, you don't need to work on yourself. You're good. Stay the same. So God, in the sense, should have never created the universe. He should have just stayed. So if He did create the universe and He's perfect and He's not getting anything out of it, so who's getting out of it? Who's getting out of it? If He's not getting anything, obviously we're the ones getting out of it. Meaning what? That if Hashem created this world, God created this magnificent world with everything, with Torah, with mitzvot, and He gave us all this stuff, He's obviously not doing it because He needs anything. He's perfect. God doesn't need you to pray to Him. God doesn't need to keep Shabbat for Him. God doesn't need to keep kosher for Him. He doesn't need you to stop eating at dairy, non-kosher dairy and non-kosher sushi restaurants or going out to the club. He doesn't need you to do those things. He's perfect. He doesn't need anything. He has everything He needs. So who are you doing it for? If God's telling you not to do these things, who are you doing it for? For Him? No, you're doing it for yourself. And from that moment, David's perspective changed. And he realized what? That this stuff that God's telling me to do, He doesn't need me to pray and say, God, you're so great. When we say in the davening, Kadosh, Kadosh, God, you're so great, you're so this. You're not doing it because it's for God. You're doing it for yourself because you're realizing you're a part of God. God created us in His image. We're also great. Meaning what? The idea is what? That he realized that God is not out to get us. God didn't give us the Torah to make our life thing. He just changed his perspective. He did the same exact thing. He's keeping Shabbat, keeping kosher, but now he's looking at it from a different perspective. Instead of looking at it as a burden that God's out to get me, no, this is the greatest thing that ever. God gave this to me so I live the best life. And he changed his perspective. And he realized, and from that, and what happened with David, he became, I know David personally. He's a very big influential person in my life. David became one of the biggest. He actually became a rabbi, and just you don't have to become a rabbi, just because you become religious. But he was so he turned from an atheist, someone hating religion, to someone who's so in love with religion and so in love with God and Torah that he dedicated his life to spread Judaism. And he's one of the biggest teachers in the Kiruv in the Jewish world. And he teaches thousands and thousands of people of how God exists and Torah's from God and all these different topics, free will, whatever. And he's one of the the top people in the field today in Jewish education and outreach. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is what? We have to all change our perspectives. It doesn't matter what mitzvah you're keeping from the, you're so, whatever scale on the religious level you are. It doesn't matter if you're keeping, something called Yashan, or you're keeping something called Mayim Achronim, or you're keeping Shabbat, or you're keeping kosher. It doesn't matter. Whatever you're doing, you have to realize that you're not doing anything for yourself. You're not doing anything for God. You're doing everything for yourself. So you got to change your perspective. And if you don't change your perspective, you're always going to look at your life and in a negative way, and you're going to miss the point of Judaism. You're going to miss the purpose of life, and that's why. By the way, it makes sense for me. There's a lot of people, where I live, in the area I live. There's a lot of moms from a certain sect of certain type of area in the Middle East. I'm not going to say who. You could guess if you want to. And these moms, for them in the area where I live, they literally will. If their kid says they want to become religious, it's the end of the world. Oh my gosh, you want to become religious? Oh my, it's horrible. Oh my gosh, And now you can't go to uncle's house drive to my uncle's house on Shabbat. Now you can't, eat with me at non-kosher restaurants. They look at it in such a negative way, and now I understand why they look at it like that. Because they look at Judaism as a burden. Obviously, if Judaism is a burden, they're going to do it. And some of the people I know, they're literally hiding from their parents to pray, to go to shul. There's one kid I know that on the holiday Shavuot, where you're supposed to spend the entire night learning, just one time out of the year, spend the night learning Torah with everybody. The parents locked him in the house, put the alarm on, turned off the lights, so he couldn't do that. Why? Now I understand why parents would want to do that. Now it makes sense, because if they look at Judaism as something like, oh my gosh, if my kid becomes religious, my kid comes closer to God, he can't be a professional, he can't become this, he can't become that, right? Misconception, obviously, but that's what they think, because they see a few, people who are not doing that, so they assume everyone's like that, right? They make the general, they look at everyone generally like that. But that's why they're trying so hard for their kids not to be religious, and their kids are like, what do you mean? Religion is not like that. You're missing the point. So the idea is what? Why I mentioned that story is not only that we have to change our perspective and look at Judaism from a light of Hashem is here to make our lives better, and Torah is that ultimate manual to live the best life in this world. We have to help other people also. If you see your parents, if you see your cousins, if you see your relatives, it's not enough for you to just keep this idea for yourself. Because there's something called the 5 misconceptions of Judaism. These are the 5 things that before people want to become religious or come closer to God and start learning Torah, you have to take down these 5 misconceptions, or else it's going to be a very hard journey for them. And I think this is one of the misconceptions, that Judaism takes the fun out of life. That people think to be religious, it means to end life. It means you can't have fun. It means you can't enjoy. It means you can't be a professional. No. That's one of the misconceptions, and I took it down for you guys, and I hope I did. But don't only share that with. Don't only keep this information for yourself. Share it with another person you know. Share this idea. Get this idea across them. Maybe share them this video. Maybe you yourself do it. Or if you check out Indisputable Truth, there's a whole section of the 5 misconceptions of Judaism, and one of them is Judaism takes the fun out of life. Whatever. Go over this. Teach this idea to other people, and you'll never know. You could change people's perspectives and ultimately change their lives. So thank you everybody for listening. Take care.